Alrighty everybody, welcome to the 2022 Triumph Trident. And this isn't just any Trident. This one is mine. I picked up this beautiful matte Baja Orange example brand new just a little over a week ago, and at the time of recording this voiceover, I've put just about 500 and change miles on it. Now, this isn't my first bike, but I'm still a relatively inexperienced rider. I don't have thousands of hours in the saddle, and I haven't ridden hundreds of bikes, so my frame of reference is a little limited. In this video, I'm going to try to review the Trident from the perspective of a new owner and rider. Now, obviously, I really like this bike. There are a lot of reasons that I bought it, most of which I'll get to today. Of course, there are some not so stellar areas, which we'll talk about too. As we pull away, I'll start us off with some facts and figures, starting with the big one, the price. Triumph will sell you a new Trident for $8,395 in Sapphire Black, but if you, like me, want something with a bit more pop, any of the other three colors bump it to $8,520. Although it's not the cheapest of its class, the Trident brings a lot to the table that its nearest competitors, the MT-07, SV650, and CB650R, can't boast at a competitive price point. It beats out the MT-07 and SV650 in the horsepower department with a brisk 80, but it loses to the more expensive 650R. This theme continues across almost every category. So, you might be asking yourself, why not buy the Honda? And there are two reasons, as far as I'm concerned: price and character. The Trident, with the more complete electronics suite, costs almost $1,000 less in its base form. The rest, honestly, comes down to personal preference, and mine is definitely for this bike. But anyway, enough of the specs. If you want a more complete list, I'll put it in the description where you can check it out at your will. So, on to that character I was talking about. The Trident, to me, is a perfect blend of fun and refined. In fact, it's really an extraordinarily good all-arounder. And as I pull away from that stop sign, you may notice the rev counter flashing at me. That's because I'm still in the 600-mile/1,000 kilometer break-in period. Under that break-in period, you're not supposed to keep the bike above 4,000 RPM for extended periods, which is all well and good, except that it's really difficult to do. The flashing actually highlights one of my few genuine gripes with this bike. The gearing is low enough that at 6th gear at 4,000 RPM is just barely above 50 miles per hour. Although the power band realistically begins around 5K, there's enough low end to allow for lower RPMs at higher speed. This brings us on, however, to one of the biggest reasons that I bought the bike, the engine. There's just something so special about a triple. The 660cc unit in the Trident revs out to 10,250 RPM, where it makes the aforementioned 80 horsepower. It's really a delightful little engine, the perfect combination of 2-cylinder grunt and 4-cylinder high-end power. It's rewarding to rev out, but also has excellent low-speed, low RPM manners, all the way down to about 2,500 RPM. It's also quite a smooth engine up to about 6,500 RPM, where sustaining that rate results in some vibration through the foot pegs and handlebars. One of the gripes that other reviewers have had about this bike is the throttle feel. However, I can honestly report that I don't feel the lag in the throttle that they've brought up. As we pull to a stop at this stop sign, it seems like a good time to talk about ergonomics. At 5 feet 11 inches, with a 32-inch inseam, I have no problem flat-footing the Trident. The seat sits at a quoted 31.7 inches and is reasonably well padded. It's comfortable enough to do longish day trips, but I probably wouldn't want to sit in it for much longer than that. My only real complaint is that the seat is covered in, I think, a quite attractive, but also very slippery leatherette material. Under braking, it tends to allow you to slip forward against the tank in a somewhat uncomfortable way. Otherwise, however, the Ergonomics package is very comfortable. My legs aren't super scrunched up, and I have just a slight lean forward at the waist, putting very little weight on my wrists. Additionally, the Trident is narrow through the knees, making it really easy to grip with my legs. Also playing into my level of comfort is the ride quality. We'll talk about how the suspension handles in just a minute here, but for now, suffice it to say that it soaks up the bumpy Colorado roads pretty well. It's not the cushiest suspension as compared to something like a Royal Enfield Continental GT650, but it's also far more confidence-inspiring through the bends. The Trident comes equipped with a set of very nice 41mm upside-down, non-adjustable Showa forks at the front end, and a Showa preload adjustable monoshock at the rear. As with most things on this bike, the suspension seems to be a combination of sporty and comfortable enough to use regularly. Although it's not the most premium suspension, we'll find that as we get onto a slightly twisty road, it's more than up to the challenge. The handling characteristics of this little bike are genuinely excellent. It's remarkably easy to handle at low speeds, stable at highway speeds, and on a nice twisty road. Well, this excellent chassis coupled with well-tuned suspension makes it a joy to ride. It's easy to lean side to side, and very stable and confidence-inspiring around a bend. Because I am nothing if not thorough, we're gonna take a quick jaunt down this dirt road. And I'll be honest, dirt is not where I'm most comfortable as a rider, and it's not where the Trident feels most at home either. Now, make no mistake, the bike will handle a bit of dirt if you ask it to. It's just that with its road tires and shorter travel suspension, it's not going to be a fire road demolishing monster. To pick back up the handling characteristics, I want to talk a little bit about the brakes. One of the other complaints that gets brought up in reviews is about the stopping power, and this one, unfortunately, I agree with. Although completely adequate, the lever feel is pretty mushy, which can be disconcerting when you go to grab a handful of the fronts under heavy braking. Again, the dual Nissan front calipers provide enough stopping power, it's just that the feel isn't good enough to feel really confident in them. I suspect that this is largely to make it a bit more beginner-friendly, and also because Triumph had to cut costs somewhere to deliver at a competitive price point. The addition of sintered brake pads is supposed to improve performance, and I plan to make the switch when I get a chance. That being said, under most circumstances, the brake feel isn't much of a bother. In fact, when it comes to a more controlled stop, the lever allows for very steady braking. Additionally, I find that I use engine braking to slow myself in almost equal parts most times. As we come to another stop, it's time to discuss the display and controls. Through my camera, the glare and reflection of my helmet is quite a bit worse than it is with the naked eye, so check out the supplemental footage instead. The menus on this bike are simple, easy to navigate, and aesthetically pleasing as they scroll across the TFT display set in this lovely round gauge cluster. The main card that you can see is configurable with different displays and readouts, which allows for reasonable rider customization. I have it set to display the gear indicator, but that can be relegated to the conventional LCD upper display if desired. Through the menus, you can also configure the traction control settings as well as change ride modes. However, it's also possible to switch modes without accessing complicated menus by simply pressing the M or mode button, pressing left or right on the D-pad, and fully closing the throttle. Speaking of ride modes, there is definitely a difference between rain and road mode. So much so, in fact, that after starting the bike in rain mode, after riding many miles in road, I genuinely thought that something was wrong with the bike before I remembered. Although that may sound like a complaint, that's not actually the case at all. I think it's nice to have such a big difference between the two modes, and if you do encounter adverse weather, having that toned down power delivery, or in fact if you're just a new rider and are a little unused to the amount of power, it's pretty useful to have. As we ride along this slightly faster section of road, I want to revisit what I said earlier about the bike being really stable at highway speeds. And I stand by that. It's true, you don't feel like the bike is unstable or like it's going to try to fall over on you, but because it is a naked bike, the sort of nature of it means that you're going to get buffeted by the wind. And I've noticed that on the Trident, the point at which you start to really fight the wind is about 65 or 70 miles per hour. Now, basically any motorcycle is versatile enough that you can use it in whatever way you choose. And if you do want to use the Trident as more of a long distance touring bike, then, absolutely you can do that. However, I would definitely recommend looking into a windscreen at least if that's how you plan on using it. And truthfully, if your goal is touring, I would recommend something like the Tiger 660 instead. It comes with a lot more wind protection. As we near the end of our route and of this review, I do want to talk about that Tiger 660 again. It's a very appealing prospect, and again, comes with sort of more wind protection and more options in terms of bags. So, given that it's essentially the same bike with different fairings, why would you go for the Trident over the Tiger? And again, that kind of comes down to personal preference. For me, really, it's that I love the way the Trident looks. I think this is a beautiful bike, and especially in this orange color. It's unique and just a little bit different and I think more special than the Tiger. But again, that's personal preference, and the Tiger is a great looking bike too. So let's finish up this review with a little bit of a wrap up, and I'll give you my final thoughts. To summarize a very long-winded review, I think that my key takeaways from my first week of riding this bike are essentially as follows. One, if your intention is to buy the Trident as a first bike, I think it's truthfully a pretty good choice. It's not super unwieldy, it's relatively light, it's powerful, but not too powerful, and especially if you kick it into rain mode, it gives you a decent learning curve to get used to the power of the bike as a new rider. Two, if you're not a new rider, but perhaps you're looking for a really nice sort of middleweight bike, or a second bike, or you're a returning rider, well, this is a great choice for you too. I mean, it's plenty fast, it handles beautifully, and it has a little bit more of that premium edge than its Japanese competitors. I think that overall, this is just a really nice little bike. It's fun, and it's comfortable, and it's easy to ride, and for me at least, it's everything that I sort of want a motorcycle to be. Now, it's going to be up to you to decide whether or not the Trident is the motorcycle for you, especially in a segment that has a lot of really strong competition. However, I would certainly recommend taking it out for a ride if you get a chance. I fell in love with the character of the engine and the way it handled, and I think that if you give it a chance, you might too. Alrighty, well, that wraps up today's review. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that this has been helpful to you. And if you have questions, I encourage you to throw them down in the comments. And if you wouldn't mind dropping a like on this video and subscribing if you'd like to see more content on this bike, I would really appreciate it. Have a good day, everybody, and thank you again for watching.